panelists or moderator, educators, guests, members, all, a pleasant afternoon to you. It is my honor this afternoon on behalf of the National Executive to welcome you to our World Teachers' Day panel discussion. I take this opportunity to wish all celebrants, past and present teachers, educators of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique, and the wider world, a happy World Teachers' Day. Now, we do know that the international celebrations would be tomorrow, October 5th, but as a union and a teaching fraternity, we do celebrate today. So happy World Teachers' Day to each of you, and thank you so much for joining us. Today, we honor your contributions, not just in the classroom, but the impact that you have on the lives of the students and the wider community. Thank you for your tireless efforts and for being champions of growth and development in our nation. This year's theme, Valuing Teachers' Voices Towards a New Social Contract for Education, resonates deeply with us as a union. It is my pleasure as General Secretary of the Union to welcome you to this very important discourse. It is also my pleasure to officially introduce you to our panel moderator or panelist moderator, panel discussion moderator, Sister Carrie Sabazan. She has been an educator for the past 22 years and sits as the president of the St. Patrick branch. Sister Sabazan is also the president of the Holy Spirit Catholic School and a trade unionist, developing passionate trade unionist at heart. It is my pleasure to introduce you to her and to hand the mic to her to take us through this discussion. Sister Sabazan.
Pleasant good afternoon to our online audience and to our distinguished panelists. I have with me this afternoon to deliberate on the topic, Valuing Teachers' Voices Towards a New Social Contract in Education, two distinguished educators. To my immediate right, I have Mr. Kenny James, and Mr. Kenny James is an avid trade unionist, having served on the National Executive for many years, both as President General and as Executive Officer of the Grenada Union of Teachers. He has been an educator for 29 years. He has served as Vice Principal and Senior Social Science Teacher at the St. Rose Modern Secondary School. And today, he continues to cultivate the young minds of our youth as principal of the Grenada Boys Secondary School. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Kenny James. To my further right, we have a retired educator, Mrs. Maureen Griffith-Joseph. Mrs. Maureen Griffith-Joseph answered the call to serve as a teacher on Tuesday, 16 September 1968, and retired from as of 1st December 2008, 40 years of yeoman service to the educational landscape of Grenada. She first served as teacher at the St. George's Government School from September 1968 to January 1983, then transferred to St. George's Methodist School. She then became the principal of St. George's Methodist School from September 1996 to November 2008. Mrs. Griffith-Joseph was an active member of the GUT St. George's branch throughout the years in the teaching service. Attendance at branch meeting was considered serious business. She performed the role of branch secretary for 2 years when Mr. Victor Antoine was branch president. She was also a participant in the first GUT CTF summer course in July 1969. Mrs. Griffith-Joseph also served as a member of the GUT Education Committee in the years 2006-2007, engaging in the task of revising and updating the GUT's members' kit. After her retirement in December 2008, Mrs. Joseph served as supervisor of the CXC examinations from 2010 to 2024. She was also a member of the interim committee appointed to form the GUT Retirees Association in June 2013. Mrs. Joseph served as secretary to the National Executive of the GUT Retirees Association from 2014 to September 2024. Ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Maureen Griffith Joseph. Our panelists this afternoon will first of all present on the topic, the theme of the World Teachers' Day celebration, which is valuing teachers' voices towards a new social contract in education. And I'm just echoing the sentiments of our General Secretary that it is a very timely topic because teachers are one of the key stakeholders in education, and their voices at times must be valued and must be heard. So our panelists will first present on the theme, and then we'll have questions from the moderator and also from the audience who are listening on. Thank you. I now invite Mr. Kenny James, Brother Kenny James, to go first as the lone man in the midst, and then Sister Maureen Griffith Joseph will go after. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, and pleasant afternoon to our comrades joining us via Zoom. Pleasant afternoon, of course, to the two ladies sitting on this panel with me and our General Secretary. Happy World Teachers' Day to all educators, teachers, and everyone else who performs the role of a teacher in the life of some youngster. Today is a special day for us as educators. And just to give us some context, World Teachers' Day is promoted every year by Education International. Who is Education International? Education International is the largest teacher trade union in the world, representing over 32 million teachers. So you hear numbers, 32 million teachers. Affiliated by about 383 member states or member organizations. And of course, the Grenada Union of Teachers is one of these organizations. And so members would hear us speak about the Education International Congress. And that Congress is where EI, as we would for short refer to them, would bring together trade unionists from all over the world, from 178 countries. So this is the global organization that represents our interest internationally. And they have seen it fit to ensure that every year that some focus is being brought on teaching and what we do as educators. The theme for this year clearly speaks to the need that exists around the world. And in some ways, we may say as educators in Grenada that we have it pretty easy as compared to others. And clearly, the voices, even in Grenada, the voices of teachers must be valued as we go forward in developing that social compact that is going to propel our society forward. We've just, and we're still going through that because there are some people who still haven't received their salaries, but in the past few days, we've seen the union increasing the pressure for the non-payment of salaries for teachers who all documents for them were submitted since May, June, yet in September, they weren't paid. And in some ways, we have to look at the reality of this. And part of that reality is the commitments that teachers have, whether it's mortgages, whether it's their children, right? Whoever they owe in the small shop that they need to pay. But apart from that, these teachers are still expected to show up to work, be professional, and to deliver in the classroom. while their pockets are empty. So in our context, of course, our voices have been heard. And so we've seen the work of the union here, and we know what is going to happen going forward. Some people receive, some people are still expecting, and we're told by next week, Wednesday, please the Lord, everybody should receive their salaries. So while this, at this point, may be a major issue for us, in which our voices are being heard, and we're making them hear us, we can go back to look at the pension struggle for our teachers. When in 2018, we needed to take this thing to the streets to ensure that our voices are heard and that the world see and that the world becomes aware of the injustice that was being meted out to teachers and other public officers. And it was a grave injustice, because here you have teachers, public officers, who would give 20, 26, 30 years, 40 years to the service of the country and will retire into poverty. Juxtapose that to someone who you and I would vote for. We give a job, and that person goes into that job, whether they function or not, effectively or efficiently, they were going to receive a pension benefit simply because you and I went and dipped our finger in the ink to say we are giving them a job. What could be more unjust, inequitable than such a situation? Our voices needed to be heard. So in many areas, locally, we see the need to have our voices heard. Internationally, we have to bear in mind that while we in Grenada, we have free education, meaning boys and girls get up in the morning and they report to school, they go to school, some of them call school, but the fact is they go to school. School is available. And now we say it's available till the age of 18. In many jurisdictions, in many countries around the world, that luxury of free public education is not available. And so you have situations where some teachers are still hiding to teach, because if elements of the state find out that they're teaching, they can be arrested. You have situations where teachers have been arrested for teaching because what they're teaching is not what the political directorate would want them to teach. And so they are in a constant battle. Education International, for example, has had to make representation for the release of teachers who were imprisoned simply for teaching. So this whole concept of free education that we enjoy as a luxury, there are others around the world who are not enjoying that, and their voices must be heard. We look at the issue of the professional development of teachers, which is another major area where the voices of teachers must be heard. We tend to believe that anybody could teach. And to some extent, that cliche is correct. Because you could teach, whether it's something good or whether it's something bad, you can teach. You can influence. You can facilitate learning. But when we talk about pedagogy, when we talk about the art of instructing in a systematic way to get a young man or a young lady to learn, that's a different story. That is an art, that is a skill that is developed. That is something that in most instances, in most cases, we have to be taught. So while we are in a position where we just would employ people who are qualified, academically qualified, in terms of getting them to develop the art of teaching, it is important for us to have professional development. It's important for us to have teacher training for these individuals. And so, even in these areas, our voices must be heard. And so, as we commemorate World Teachers' Day, I just want to put these out there for us to ponder on, that we can think of and even expand the thought process as far as these are concerned, that we can see where we are deficient and what we need to do to improve our education system.
Thank you very much, Mr. James. And Mr. James has given us a lot of food for thought that we can resonate on and think about the questions that you can ask as the panel discussion continues. I now invite Mrs. Joseph to make her presentation.
I would like to say greetings, first of all, to all teachers in Grenada, the Caribbean, wherever this broadcast is being carried. Greetings to all teachers, wherever you are. With regards to the theme, valuing teacher voices, how and where do we use those precious gifts of voices? At this commemoration of World Teachers' Day, I would like to encourage teachers to use their voices not only in the classroom and at home or in social settings, but use them to at times when you need to deal with the issues, dealing with the issues, don't be afraid to use your voices. When you have concerns, relevant, it's not about the personalities, but about the issues at hand that you need to deal with. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Joseph. And as we heard from our panelists, there are various ways that teachers' voices need to be heard. Mr. James, as I iterated earlier, gave a lot of food for thought. He gave us a history behind World Teachers' Day and the fact that it came out of an educational international initiative to remember and appreciate the jobs that teachers do. In addition, he gave us some practical examples of how, within our Grenadian context, our voices can and should be heard. Two really stood out to me as, well, principal and educator, the voice in terms of professional development and teacher training. And as Mrs. Joseph would have indicated, we need also to have a voice and let our voices be heard when it comes to issues and concerns that affect us as teachers. So I'd like to ask the panelists a question. Within our present circumstances or present educational context, how easy or how difficult do you think it is for teachers' voices to be acknowledged and heard? Because I also believe sometimes our voices first need to be acknowledged before they could even hear the voices. So what do you think are the challenges that prevent our voices in our present system from being heard?
I think we are in an excellent position for our voices to be heard. Teachers form a major block in our society. Remember, while they would earn more money than us, the lawyers, the doctors, all the professions, we are the ones who held them in preschool. We're the ones who carried them through the primary school. We're the ones who guided them through secondary school. And so in the heart of every Grenadian there's a soft spot for teachers. As to whether we understand the power that we have is a different story. We saw, for example, and I made reference earlier to the pension struggle, where the GUT and teachers led this struggle in Grenada, and we've seen the results. Now, teachers are able to influence political decisions. As to whether we allow our various orientation in terms of party and so to affect us and how we treat with the bread and butter issues is a different story. But it's important for us to remember, when it gets down to bread and butter, there's nothing about color, because bread and butter is about you taking care of yourself and you taking care of your family. So it's important for us to rally together. And I think the Grenadian society has over the years developed a certain level of appreciation and respect for teachers, that when we speak, they're willing to listen. You see, that period, the summer vacation, when parents have to deal with what we are dealing with, or some of the realities that we're dealing with in the classroom, that's when some of them really appreciate the fact that, boy, teachers doesn't have it easy. They're actually parents who are looking forward to us as the teachers doing the parenting for them. Because in some instances, they can't talk to the children, but they are convinced that if I come to the school and I talk to the teacher or I talk to the principal, they will be able to get through or to influence the behavior of their child or children. So we are in a good place, and I think the society, by and large, is open to listening to us and working with us as teachers.
Thank you very much for that response, Mr. James. You had me smiling. Mrs. Joseph?
How do we get listeners to our teacher voices? People need to be aware that teachers are not only concerned about money. From my personal experience as a teacher, I began teaching in September, and my first salary came at the end of January the following year. It was a patient time, but I went to school every day and I did my work as I was expected to. And during the years that have passed on, we have seen examples of that, teachers having to wait, and whenever there is negotiation, and you have to march in the hot sun and all of that. But it is not just about the money. Disciplining of the children, as Mr. James just pointed out, they would come to you. And in many cases, children they're likely to pay attention to the teacher. They will listen to the teacher. They will come and say, my teacher says this, or my teacher says that. So how do we get others to listen to the teacher's voice? It is indeed a challenge, especially nowadays. But we have to try. We do have to try and encourage not only the people in the community or other teachers or organizations within our society, but Teachers are sometimes labeled as being lazy, but we need to help them to understand that they don't have to go to that. Teachers are not really lazy, because when other people cannot take care of their children, it is the teacher who does a lot more. Teachers do a lot more than what they are expected to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister Maureen. And Miss Joseph, I have another question for you, because you are around the table here, you have a wealth of knowledge and experience from the education system. So I'll just ask, what are some of the differences you note within the past years and this present construct of education?
I think in the past, teachers seem to be more committed. I find nowadays teachers are more concerned about getting upgraded and getting more money, especially the males. Sorry about that, but it's a fact, because in my experience, I remember there was a teacher in my school who every month he will come and ask me, Miss Joseph, did I get an increase this month? He didn't remain long in the teaching. But the male teachers especially, they don't want to stay in the teaching business, because it is too much commitment and too much of a serious, I wouldn't say job, but this whole issue of preparing lessons and things like that. But we must prepare, we must prepare. We must prepare and plan before we go to the students. If not, it's chaos. We are likely to have chaos in the classroom. And our children, they observe. Some of them might echo what they observe. Some go home with it. Some take it into their career later on. So the dedication, I'm not so sure if it's still there, because I find teachers nowadays have a lot of, seem to have a sort of freedom. And they're interested in, yes, I need to upgrade, and I need to work for more money, that's true, but ensuring that your students move from where they are to where they're expected to be. That, helping them, especially in areas where they're struggling. Our children now, there are children who need more than classroom activity as a group. Especially those little boys. They need that one-on-one. A few minutes with their teacher, even if it's during break time or during lunch time, and our teachers, I really, really, really commend them, who take from their time during lunchtime or break time to spend 10 minutes with this little boy who is struggling. And sometimes you see the joy, that I'm able to get 6 words today. So it's more than a walk. it's more than a job. And the community, the society, they have expectations of us. We have not reached a stage where we can work miracles yet, but we have to try to help them, because down the line, those students meet us and they do more than point fingers. We meet them at all sectors of the society. So we have to try our best to maximize the time we spend with our students. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Joseph. Mr. James, as principal of one of the largest secondary schools in Grenada and the largest boys' secondary school in Grenada, Mrs. Joseph made reference to some things that spoke specific to the education of boys. And I know over the years that's one of the struggles that we as educators and even the educational system in Grenada has struggled with. How do we cater for the boys within our educational system? At the same time, while we're catering for our boys, how can the teachers' voices be heard in that catering for the boys within our educational system?
This is indeed a heavy one. How do we cater for boys? And how do we cater for boys when, as Sister Joseph has said, males don't want to remain in teaching? We have a social dilemma. And that social dilemma starts from the fact that we have, as a society, promoted the fact that men are the providers and that a man should provide for his family. So coming out of that, you have that desire of a male to be in a position where he is secured financially. So comparing teaching to another job opportunity, be it in the private sector or elsewhere, a male may just decide, listen, I have had enough of this. So is the salary and benefits of a teacher attractive enough to retain males that a man could feel satisfied that he is taking care of himself and he's taking care of his family comfortably? Most teachers, most male teachers, you would find, do something more than just teaching. So some of us are into agriculture. Some of us are doing extra classes and so on. Of course, to ensure that we provide for our families. So you have that aspect of it. Sister Joseph made reference to the upgrades and so. And I think it's a fact. One of the difference with the current arrangement in the system and what obtained before is that through the work of the union, we've been able to get the qualifications of teachers to be recognized. So there was a time, for example, when a teacher had a bachelor's degree, that teacher would end up in the ministry in the morning because the pinnacle was a teacher education certificate. You went to teachers' college and you were safe, you were set for life. The bar has since been raised. So now, of course, if you want to improve your financials and your earnings, you go to teachers' college, you become a qualified teacher, you go pursue your bachelor's, you pursue your master's, grad 1, grad 2, right? Because with that comes an increase in salary and you're in a better position. Now, how do we weigh this increase and this pursuit for excellence by the teacher with commitment and commitment in the classroom. That is something that now we really need to work on in the system. That it's not just seen, as Sister Joseph said, as a work, but in some ways it is a labor of love, particularly teaching our boys. So our female teachers have to understand, no boy would sit in a class and just sit there for 45 minutes without joking another boy, as we say on the side. The average boy must joke the boy on the other side, because he will be bored with a teacher just in front of the blackboard, a teacher sitting down in front of the class, no movement in the class. He is bored. Girls would respond to that easier. But to get the attention of boys, you need to be active. You need to be engaging. You need to capture the boys' attention and to retain that attention for the 45 minutes. So, for boys, active learning is important. We must be a participant in the process. Just to sit down there and write notes or to listen to you is a recipe for classroom disruption. But when I know a question might be coming my way, when I have something before me that I have to think about, or maybe sitting in a group, I have to contribute, then that's a different story. When I have something of color in front of me, that's different. When I have something that's interactive, so boys, you see our boys, they're on the phones, they're playing the games and so on. Why? Gaming is a big thing. Why? Because there's something there, the action there is capturing them. And so it's important for us in the classroom to simulate that kind of attraction, that we can capture the attention of the boys and there impart knowledge. Right? So our female teachers, as well as our males, need to understand that. Our males also need to be cognizant that many of the boys sitting before us are suffering from the father wound. What's the father wound? There's no daddy at home. And why daddy is not at home is possible. Mommy and daddy fall out over whatever. And the children, the boy is the victim. Now, mommy has a new boyfriend. But mommy, somewhere it's not registering to mommy that her son sees himself as her protector. So with this new boyfriend who feels he is now the new man in the house and he wants to instruct her son, there's conflict. Because as we say in local parlance, who is you to come in the house that my father built to tell me what to do? And so we are losing some of our boys because of some of these social situations, right? And so when we see them acting out, very often they're acting out not because they're wicked, not because they're bad-minded, but it's because of the situations that confront them that sometimes their mothers don't take time to understand. A woman cannot teach a boy to be a man. We would stand over the toilet and you would sit. Major difference. And so there's need for, in every boy's life, for that connection, that engagement with a male, with father, with man, to understand how man must grow, how man must operate, how man is socialized within the Caribbean construct and within the Grenadian construct. So it's important now for us as males in the classroom and as male teachers to recognize that before us, there are many boys who have this situation, and in some cases, we have to now stand in the gap to guide them, to mentor them, to teach them how to be a male, how to be a man and how to be a productive male in the society. And this is one of the major challenges that we face across the board. And it is something that we see, I mean, at the GBSS, I always tell them, we have most of the males in Grenada, 760. In any part of Grenada, you won't find all that man in one place. But I always say to them, to my staff, and to the boys, if we could change the mindset of this 760 boys, then Grenada and the Caribbean could be a better place. And so we have to work on it. It's not going to be easy. It's not an easy task. We may not win all, but we have to do our best within the system as males to try and reach out and to stand in the gap for these young men. And I've always been saying to the ladies, it is important, and you have to understand, boys must be led. Boys cannot be left up to their own devices. They'll just get in trouble. But there must be some leadership. And if we don't train them, eventually what would happen is that your daughters will be in trouble. Because we have a saying in the society, when you're in good house, bad house just call you. So you're training your daughter well. But here's what, the boy that she's attracted to is a bad boy, as we would call them. So if we aren't able to manage that bad boy and to get him to understand that there's a certain way and mode of behavior that he has to exhibit as a productive member of the society, it means that our family structure in the long term is going to be in trouble. And if you feel like you're protecting yours by the way you're training them, you might realize what you don't want in your back door is what you're getting in your front door. That's the reality.
Thank you very much, Mr. James. Go ahead, Mrs. Joseph.
Yes, I would like to make a point on two issues. One, Mr. James mentioned that the male teachers tend to, they sometimes need to do more than have other activities. Many of us heard of a gentleman by the name of Mr. E.R.L. Hines. As a young teacher, I used to take time by Mr. Hines because when I see Mr. Hines going down on mornings, 6:30, Mr. Hines is going down to his garden. And by 7:30, he's going back up. And many mornings I got a lift with him because his school started in St. George's at 8:30. And Mr. Hines used to grow things like lettuce and cabbage and so on that he used to come and sell to food fair. And then sometimes on Thursdays or Fridays, the vendors came to purchase items from his garden. So doing more than just the teaching, being involved in agriculture, I learned quite a lot too from his father, Mr. Norman Hines. He showed me how to cut potato vines, the slip. And I remember Mr. Norman Hines, Mr. E.R.L. Hines' father, saying to me, "Which school do you go to?" And when I told him, he said, "No, you don't go and sit by the window and watch for the prettiest boys you see passing, you know." I remember that. Back to the boys. Our boys, our teachers, not only for the boys, but especially for the boys, we need to relook our planning of lessons. We need to provide practical activities in some cases. And I've had some interaction with Mr. James's gentleman, and when I asked them for in your E&E classes, electrical and electronic, do you engage in practical activities like, let's say, like taking an old motor and with your teacher and teacher strip it apart and they show you the different parts? No, miss, we never do that. But when they come to do the exam, it's a problem. They have difficulty. So for the boys, I will say we need to relook the way we plan and get them and provide with them in the teaching more practical activities. And one more point I would like to share: how our children play. I was told Caribbean children don't know how to play, and I wasn't pleased about that at all. So I said, all this time the children outside, they play hopscotch, they skip, hop, jump. No, not that. But it's not that they don't know how to play. Our children, for sure, they do not know how to engage in play. When we observe them, let's say in the schoolyard, in the classroom, in order to play with another child, a child will just go and hit another child a hard slap. Why do you hit? Miss, nothing. I just want to play with him. But if you want to play with him, and I had to speak to children during assembly and in class, you engage them in a conversation. Good morning, how are you? Because sometimes a child might come to school under a lot of pressure. We don't know. Say, how are you? Or if it's a little girl, you might say, you have a pretty hairstyle today. Who helped you to do your hair? But engage them in a conversation. But because when you hit, you hurt. So that's another area where I would like our teachers' voice to be heard, to get our children to understand that engaging in play does not mean to hit somebody a slap or to wring their ears or to kick them or to pinch them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sister Maureen raised a very important issue where our voices must be heard. You see, these subjects. So we hear, as she correctly mentioned, E&E, electronics, and electrical. And you would think that a young man who has done this course for CSEC at secondary school should be able to come and put up a fixture for you. Because what he is doing in that subject is more physics and mathematics than anything else. And so this is why you find many of our boys, you hear that there are technical subjects in schools, in secondary school, and you're still wondering why some of the boys are still failing. Because these subjects, in many cases, are not competency-based. It's not using your hands to do the practical aspect of it. You may have practical in SBA, which might be one project or two projects. This is where New Law comes in, New Life Organization, where the boys get the opportunity to go and actually put their hands in the thing and to do it. And we must accept that there are boys, there are students in our country who are these kind of tactile learners who need to be in an environment where they can actually do. And this bombarding them with 5 and 10 and 8 subjects will not work because that is not their makeup, that's not their inclination. They need to be able to read. They need to be able to do math. They need to know how to be good citizens. They must have some computer literacy because everything now has to do with IT and using the computer. But after that, what is their interest? So we have to relook at this, and the voices of educators must be heard when we talk about skill training or technical and vocational education, TVET education, as opposed to the pure academic education. Our voices must be heard there, particularly when we put that against universal secondary education. Because what can happen is we can spoil some of our students because we're pushing them through a system that they can't deal with. Whereas it would have been better to do some form of assessment and to see what that child needs and to channel him or her into that area. There is nothing wrong with skill training. There's nothing wrong with TVET. And the voices of teachers have to be heard across the society in this regard because there are parents who want to live through their children. So you wanted to be a lawyer, you wanted to be a doctor, you wanted to be a nurse, and you didn't make it, so you feel the child must be it. This is a major problem. Each child has a different inclination. Each child has a different gifting. And it's important for us to discover what that gifting is, unearth that gifting. And when we see what it is, to channel him or her in that direction. This is something as a Caribbean society, as a Grenadian society, we must get a grip on. Germany and these first world countries have recognized the importance of TVET training and skill training. So they're not concerned about who have their degree in this and their degree in that. There's the equivalence in TVET training to first degree, to master's degree. There's the equivalence there. And so the children can go through these areas, and at the end of the day, they feel a sense of accomplishment because they're doing well and they're making their money. And they can go anywhere. A boy with an NVQ, a boy with a CVQ can go anywhere. A girl with an NVQ and CVQ can go anywhere and seek employment. And we know now, I always say to them, if the toilet in your house is backing up and you call the plumber, all you know, you want that toilet to be able to flush. Because all this stench in the house, that ain't doing no good for you. And if you get a diarrhea with that condition, you know there is worries. So when the plumber comes and he spends half an hour there and he says to you, that is going to be $1,500, you might cry, but you go find it and give him. Why? Because he spent half an hour, but your toilet is now flushing. Now, the amount of money that he charged you for that half an hour might be somebody's salary for a whole month. This is the reality when it comes to technical and vocational education. And as educators, we must assist in helping the society to create that shift in their minds that the technical and vocational area is only for boys who can't learn or girls who can't learn, or as we say, dunce children. Every child has an area in which he can excel. It's just important for us to find it.
Thank you very much, Mr. James and Mrs. Joseph. It's like you all are speaking a book, a text that a lot of us can learn from, because we do say a lot of things and we have seen a lot of changes within our educational system, and we still hear the same cries over and over. So maybe we now need to listen to those cries and see if we can shift our mindset. You see, sometimes things work out beautifully, just the valuing of the voice, and we got so many different ways in which we can be voices for the children. And we are, at the end of the day, are very key stakeholders in the whole educational process. I would just like to share with you some of the comments that have been coming to us via our Facebook. One comment says, as it relates to the boys' education, that one size fits all doesn't work. As teachers, we need to appreciate that. We must cater for different learning styles within the classroom. It is a challenge, I know, but life was not intended to be without challenges. So teachers out there, you heard it. Next similar comment, generally boys are more active learners. Let's create active learning experiences for them. And another viewer would have said, there must be a shift in the mindset. And I think in all the different articulations this evening, one of them that is coming out, we need to shift our mindset. So while I'm here, any of our viewer persons via Zoom has any question, comment that they would like to make at this juncture? Okay. So one of our questions coming from Zoom, what systems can be established to support today's educators? And there is a little preamble to that. We have children with lots of internal issues, and it is not dealt with professionally in our educational systems. For example, we have students who are bipolar or suffering from some behavioral disorders, and it is the teachers that have to deal with it. Sometimes we don't have the mechanisms to channel those issues in a positive manner. So the question is, what systems can be established to support today's educators in a changing environment where some of the things that maybe have not presented itself so overtly before is now very overt in our education system?
We must relook training and development in our education system. We are at the place, and we've been there for a while, where we've left the desire and opportunity for specific training to be left up to the individual, because we feel, government's position really, and when I say government here, I'm not speaking about present government, I'm speaking government over the years, really is that if they send you to develop yourself, they will have to take care of you. So the shortcut to that is let you find whatever and go and do it on your own and come back. And when you come back, then we would use you if you come back. We must get past that. Now, you can't treat what you don't know exist. So there are students in our classes with learning difficulties, but as the teacher, you can only assume, based on the little training that you have, maybe from Teachers College, or some of our teachers who've done a degree in psychology or something, they could tell you, well, listen, from what I see in this child could possibly be suffering from. We need to get to the place where we can call the Ministry of Education and have the resource personnel to come in and actually test some of our students. Have the resource personnel where from the time parents recognize there's something different about this child, that they can access that facility to test them, because there's some conditions, some learning conditions that must be identified pretty early if you're going to get intervention and to correct it, right? So there must be that facility where parents can go, where teachers can make the referral that we could first test. Now, after we test and we know then we can say to teachers, okay, this child requires X or Y. This one requires Q and R. How do we get there? We as a system must start, or the system must start to identify these needs and pick some teachers out and say, listen, I am sending you to train. I hear about scholarships. And I can't understand what's happening with scholarships, because if we are looking at the development of this country, we must target that development. How do we target that development? The country must send people to train in areas where we need people, not in areas that we don't need anybody. Send people to train, seek scholarships in areas where we need development. That when these people come back and they're bonded, that we now have these resources. And with that, we could turn things around. We have to also get to the place where we accept that with the Universal Secondary Education Initiative, there are many of our boys and girls who cannot read. It's a harsh reality of our current education system. We need a 2024 version of the CPE program, Center for Popular Education for our children. And we must recognize that this, again, is a specialized area. Where are our literacy coordinators? We send people to train in the area of literacy, and then we take them and put them to do administration and do all other things. Does that make sense? And while we're doing that, we're frustrating boys and girls in school who cannot read A-B-A-B. The numeracy. They can't count 1 and 1 is 2, but they are in secondary school. So we need to provide the resources as a ministry, as a government, that is going to assist our schools. That the schools where we know we have these problems and it's chronic, that there could be a literacy coordinator. We started, in some cases, you take them out and bring them in the ministry, you bring them where. But we need it. It's needed. It's a need. We need the numeracy coordinators. And once we're able to capture these areas, I think we could be better. Have people to identify and test the children for the special needs, provide for the literacy and the numeracy of our young people, and we could have a better society. Sister Kerry in the classroom, one of the major challenges that we have because of disruption is because children can't read. So if they can't read, they're giving trouble, they're joking the next one, as we say. They want to get out of the class because they don't want to be embarrassed if they're called on to do something and they can't do it. So we must do these things, and I am hoping that our voices will be heard in this area, because in the long term, it's not going to work out well for our society and the society that we want to build. What we're going to end up having is an increase in crime, because when you can't read and you can't write, there's a level of as we just say in the society, ignorance. Right? There are anger issues because you're lashing out, and sometimes for simple things, all because maybe somebody else don't know that this is your problem. And to mask that problem, a lot of other things are happening. And some of the people, the children who are suffering with these situations are the handsome young men and the beautiful young ladies. We need to stem the tide on these.
Anything you'd like to add, Mrs. Joseph?
Sorry. Yes. There is, from my observation, there is need within our system for early assessment as early as possible to help children. It doesn't make sense you moving a child, and some of the children tell you, I've heard children say, the ministry say you mustn't keep down a child for so and so. And therefore, the teacher doesn't, bother too much. But if the child if it's likely that the child does have a problem, we need to have that child assessed and put structures in place to help that child. But we do not have that within our system. A child might come to school at 5, and sometime by the time they get to, they're 7, they're 7, grade 1, grade 2 there, you realize that that child is struggling with letters, with, simple words and so on. But within our school system, do we have the structures to help that child? Only if the teacher or both the teacher and the principal come to an agreement to help that child. And in some schools, I don't know if it still exists, but I remember in my school, for example, one of my teachers went to special needs workshop. And when she came back, she needed to put into use what she learned. So together with the staff, we agreed and we created a classroom, special classroom. And I think she's still there, or it does still exist. So the children will go at different times in the day. They go, let's say, 10, 15 minutes, depending on the age, to that classroom, that special room, and then they go back to their class for their other subjects. And those, especially those little boys, they like, Miss, we finished already? Yes. And so sometimes within the school, the specific school, we don't really, do we have to get the authoritative directive to do what we need to do to help our children? Do we? And then, especially now, whether you're ready for secondary school or you're not ready, you're going. And, well, Mr. he has a sample of it. But getting our voices heard to get our students who might be struggling, who might have problems, getting them assessed early and providing the avenues for them to help them to develop. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Joseph. As I said, we are getting a lot of education as to the avenues that our voices really needs to be heard in, because at the end of the day, we are the practitioners in the classroom. And there are times, if we're not seeing it going right, we may need to up the ante and let our voices be heard. And that's because we are trade unionists too, we often have to show them that we're not only about wages and matching for pension and so on, but we also want to cater for the other issues that affect the teachers that we represent in the classroom. And we realize that some of the decisions, some of the policies may be affecting our education system more than we thought when we made the original decision. So just to read one of the online comments: why is the ministry pushing universal education for children who cannot function at the primary level? That's a question that deserves a lot of food for thought. Mrs. Joseph also said something as to how important it is that schools too sometimes bring in their own intervention policies when they realize that there is a need and they want to curb the problems within the institution. Listening also to Mr. James, we heard about the fact that we need to have to rethink our training and development. What areas do we focus on when we train our teachers? Do we only focus on the pedagogical skills, or do we also give them training in other areas? So when they come into the classroom, they are better equipped to deal with some of the emerging issues. Okay, a question from one of our viewers. What is the greatest challenge that the education system faces today in the Grenadian context? What is the greatest challenge that the education system faces today in the Grenadian context?
The greatest challenge is ensuring that education is meeting the developmental needs of the society. And it's reflected in what I spoke about in terms of training and whether we're selecting people to train and develop in areas of need. It's reflected in the disconnect between what is offered at the CSEC level and the actual world of work. It's amplified in the fact that you have programs as the junior achievement and so on, and they're coming back with these programs. And so, where students have been developing businesses as part of these programs, they're making money. And they could tell you how much money they make, and they're making the money so that they could win. Yet, when these same students leave school, they are not engaging in creating self-employment using some of these same things. So clearly you're seeing that a lot of what is done in school, a lot of what is taught in school, is done in isolation of the societal realities. And so the task before us is to get this to be a harmonious marriage between the needs of the society and what is delivered in the education system. And we must bear that in mind, even at the level of the advanced levels. Because the student who leaves with a business associate degree, or even the one who graduates from university with a bachelor's in business, going into a business, there's some realities of that business that you were not taught in that classroom. And so when you get the job, there's a period of mentoring, there's a period of understanding the ethos of that business and what you have to do. And very often you realize, but wait now, all that I studied in school and whatnot, and bust my brains with all this time, how much of it am I actually using now in this job? So we must bring that together. I think that's the major challenge we are confronted with.
Go ahead, Mrs. Joseph.
From my point of view, the greatest challenge in our education system today is one of lack of preparing our students for life beyond the boundaries of the school walls, outside of the school walls. We prepare them, yes, to pass their exams, But what next? Preparing them to make a living beyond the walls of the school. I think that is our greatest challenge, because we seem to be preparing, yes, mainly the academics. But what about the agriculture? What about the other areas where they can create their own, our science fairs? How can we prepare our students to build on that and be creative and even get other young people like them to maybe go into a business, employ others, rather than looking for someone to give them a job? Good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, panelists. And as we proceed to bring the curtains down on our panel discussion, I would just like to reiterate a few points that were made by our panelists, common points, and then I will ask the panelists to give their closing statements, beginning with Mrs. Joseph. As our panelists spoke this afternoon into the evening, you realize that there were common threads coming out. And one of the most common thread coming out is the fact that we as educators, we do have a voice. How we use our voice is very important. They spoke to the fact that we need to really look at how we conduct training and professional development of our teachers in service or teachers college. We need to look at that critically, because though that area can make a difference. The fact that we need to look at all stakeholders in society are important. We cannot work without the home cannot work with us, without us, the community cannot work without us, society cannot work without us. Because at the end of the day, we as educators, we prepare children for the job market. But to prepare the children for the job market adequately, as the panelists were indicating, is the fact that we need to know what the job market wants, and to ensure that our education, our system meets our goals, meet those of society. Hence the reason why sometimes we have children who graduate with a lot of CXCs, and sometimes they cannot really function in the world outside there, because we train them academically, but we never train them to be active, practicing human beings making a contribution in society. Another thing that they spoke to a lot is the fact that as teachers, we need to take the business of teaching and learning seriously and see it sometimes more than just as a job. But at the same time, we also have to ensure that our policymakers do not just see it as another area in society, and that they too provide the opportunities and the channels that teachers can use, not only to enhance themselves academically, but also to give them the requisite training that they need to make a difference and be more impactful in the classroom. So now I'll ask Mrs. Joseph to make her closing remarks.
Yes, in closing, as we commemorate World Teachers' Day, I want to encourage teachers to remember that we are all called to serve. We are in the service of education, not only by projecting our voices in the classroom, but we need to project our voices in our meetings. I want to encourage teachers, attend your union meetings, attend your workshops, raise your issues, make suggestions for improvement, pay careful attention to those documents, and follow the instructions, follow the established regulations that guide your performance, like the Education Act, your performance and conduct, like the Education Act. Familiarize yourselves with the contents of those documents that are there to guide you, your duties and performance as you are in the teaching system. Also, documents like, do you still have a dress code in place? Okay, right. Other documents as well. And remember that, yes, we want our voices to be heard, but sometimes action speaks louder than words. So our personal and professional conduct as teachers, wherever we are, whether in the school, in the classroom, on the street, or in other places, remember, you are a teacher at all times, and you are still providing a service. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Joseph, and I now turn over to Mr. James.
Thank you very much to the GUT for having this discussion this afternoon where we could share with our colleagues and whoever else may be viewing or will eventually view this program. As educators, we have a great responsibility. We have the future of the nation, the future of the Caribbean in our hands. It is important then that we shape that future well. In communist ideology, they say, give me the child and I'll show you the adult. And so we need to take a page from that. That if we're able to influence and impact them positively, we'll have a society with a difference. There are areas where we need to improve, and we know ourselves, we know what we have to do, and Sister Joseph highlighted a number of areas that we need to improve on. So I wouldn't go there. But what I would say to us is, whatever we can do at this point, particularly in our nation's, the period of our nation's development, where the family structure, the extended family structure is not there, where you had that grandmother support, that auntie, that uncle, where the community really raised the child, where the church assisted in raising the child, because even if the parents weren't going to Sunday school, they were sending the children. But we don't have that anymore. Right now, what we have raising our boys and girls is Cayman 6, Plumpy Boss, Vibes Cartel, and all the others. And this is why we see in all different color scarves. This is why we see an inclination to certain behaviors. Because they are the ones, these are the influences that are now raising our young people. And as teachers, we need to stand in the gap and to make that difference. I want to encourage us to take the teaching, the educating of our young minds seriously. If we don't do it, the question is, who will? Unfortunately, there are parents who leave it up to us. There are parents who are at their wits' end with their children, and they expect that school is going to work a miracle. It is not easy. But if we do our best, and when we do our best, I believe that the boss above will do the rest in taking care of them. So as we continue to labor in this vineyard, because I would tell you, wherever you go in the world and you talk to teachers, they'll let you know in their construct, where they are, they're not paid enough for what they do as teachers. Whether in America, in Europe, wherever. When you look at the broad scope of things, the work teachers do, they're not compensated adequately for it. So that's a global issue. But let's find that place in our hearts to look beyond the issues of compensation, because we are paid well in terms of the local situation and the regional situation. We're not too badly off. But let's look beyond that and let us see the future of our young people and the future of our society. And let's do our best to make a difference. Happy World Teachers Day, and God bless you.
Thank you very much, Mr. James and Mrs. Joseph, for agreeing to be our panelists this afternoon for the panel discussion and sharing your wealth of knowledge and insight, because you were able to see a beautiful collaboration between the then, the now, and Mrs. Joseph was able to give us an insight that suggests, the wisdom of having been through it and how we can get through it. So I don't think we could have asked for better panelists for this afternoon's panel discussion to really discuss valuing teachers' voices towards a new social contract in education. I think the both of you did exceptionally well on giving us a lot of pearls that we can take home with us and really reflect upon and see how we can effect those changes within the educational system. Thank you. Happy World Teachers Day to our educators, and we hope that today, whatever tokens of appreciation you would have gotten from your staff, your children, your parents, I know they would have been deeply appreciated. So everyone, happy World Teachers Day from the Grenada Union of Teachers. God bless you.